Okay, greetings. This is a little session we decided to run for festival curious public servants who might want to know what a creative bureaucracy festival is. We are speaking with some really amazing people from Berlin and the UK. We have Charles Landry with us, who's one of the founders of this, and Robyn Bennett. And they're going to talk to us today about how the creative bureaucracy works, what it's all about, why it became a thing. So I have to say why it became the really fun, egalitarian and non-hierarchical public servant event, which is a rare beast, we must admit. So Charles and Robyn, can you introduce yourselves to our people in Australia and New Zealand?
Hi, I'm Charles Landry, and I was associated with, or am, with the creative city idea, and out of that stemmed this notion, but the public sector is also involved somehow in a city, even if it's turning the lights green or red.
And maybe
That's
following
wonderful.
up on that, I've been working on the Creative Bureaucracy Festival for the last 4 years, mainly on our international program. So that means finding examples of creative bureaucrats doing beautiful things in all different parts of the world, and then predominantly putting them on our stage in Berlin. It's a lot of fun.
Including dancing fruit, right, Robyn?
Absolutely.
From Brazil, I might add. Okay, the first question I think we've got for you two is why creative bureaucracy? Those words don't seem to hang together naturally.
That was on purpose. It's obviously an oxymoron, and the signal it's trying to send out is, hey guys, creativity sounds so wonderful, bureaucracy so boring. So there's a tension in there, and what it's really signaling is to public administrators that they also have imagination. However, they may be trapped in some system and stuff like that and not be able to fully express themselves. So the title is important, and the reason I felt so interested in all of this was for many, many years, many 30 plus years, I've been working with public servants. I'm not a public servant. I've only once for a year worked at the EU and another year for the World Bank. That was a bureaucracy. Forget that. But I always thought, look, many of these people are really interesting and so on, and that you really have to then take into account what they do. So what it is really about, a creative bureaucracy, is a place that is more open than closed. One of our slogans is, how do you move from a no because to a yes if culture? So to some extent, it's an enabling type of thing. It's about, you could say, empowerment or something like that. Now, how it got started, I was in Berlin on a fellowship, and I was trying to get some events promoted, one of them, namely a creative bureaucracy event, a smallish one and so on. And I spoke to the main Berlin newspaper, a guy who was the publisher, Sebastian Turner, and said, oh, I'm your humble person. Could you please promote an event or something like that? But surprisingly, he said, hey guys, this is the project I've been waiting for. Every day I slag the bureaucracy off and complain, and then I ask them to pay money for the paper as well. That's a bad idea. Why not have something positive? And he added the word festival to it, and that was really quite significant, because he said that makes it even more sort of remarkable or absurd in some sense. So that essentially is how it started, and that was in 2018. And because they had an events organization within the paper, it was able to sort of really launch within 3 months. Alone, I could never have done anything like this. And the first event, what it was like, it was all a bit difficult, the first meetings, because people were saying, oh, what is this? What is this? And we're very skeptical and so on. But we sort of rode through the skepticism. And the first event was sort of like, actually, I have to say, quite euphoric, because he suddenly found these people. And in fact, indeed, Robyn came up to me and I thought, oh my God, who's she? But I was so I don't know, overwhelmed that I didn't realize it was the Robyn of all Robins. But anyway, so that's how it all started. And we felt there was no other event like this that had a bit of a celebratory feel, that was more about the positive than the negative. I mean, that's my take on it. I don't know if you want to add something, Robyn.
No, I think you've described it really beautifully. So I came in a couple of years after it had started. So I'd already attended one event. I was actually working in a different sphere entirely, but very interested in the kind of questions that the festival is bringing up. And what you really notice is the energy in the room from all kinds of people. So by that, I mean all levels of government, but also all other types of actors interested in breathing life into our public systems. Coming together for very open exchange, honest discussions, and moments of joy that I wouldn't have normally associated with those types of discussion. So that was my first impression, and it's something that's then continued over time. And I think we've since then grown the festival in size here in Berlin. It's sort of doubled in the last couple of years. And the trend is going in that direction. And I think it's based on this sense. I mean, some people call it like a spa day for bureaucrats. It's kind of that idea of a therapeutic retreat almost from the day to day that gives you that renewed spirit to keep going forwards. So yeah, I think that's what I wanted to add.
I'm a personal experience here from the 2023 Creative Bureaucracy Festival in Berlin. It was like finding an oasis in the desert for me. And you know, I think you probably noticed I was bouncing off the walls. I was so happy and feeling like, oh God, I found my tribe. These people understand there's much more to this, and that for me, ultimately, our job is to serve the public. And how can we serve the public if our well is dry, if we don't have that extra discretionary effort to bring to the table? So yeah, I think the festival is an incredible way to fill that well back up and see all the different ideas people have, which is, you know, such a joy. What difference do you two think this Creative Bureaucracy Festival has made?
That's an interesting question, because we're always asking that, have we had an impact and stuff like that. But I think what happened is, because the general approach is, look, let's take a glass half full approach. We know there are problems. We know bureaucracies need to change for all sorts of reasons. But let's look at it in a way that is really saying, okay, if it changes, we must maintain something called the public interest or common interest. And that's really been our focus. And as Robyn just mentioned, this thing about people feeling together, you know, we are not alone. That spirit of we are not alone has really made me feel good as just looking at it. I think there's a perceptible, and Robyn would know this perhaps even better than me, is more and more people are approaching us, so that more and more people are wanting to be involved. So if that's one measure, you know, that people want to be with us, and also that the numbers of people coming are becoming greater and greater. Now, if that's just enough of a measure, I don't know. But there are some things that we've noticed. The various people, an Australian friend of mine got together with someone in Istanbul, did this, someone else did that. So there have been various, I'm not saying people got married or became partners through the festival, but they have made connections which have led to something else. So relationships have developed in the sense there's a core group that we might call a circle of friends or deep friends and stuff like that, who tend to often be there on the day before, which we call the Global Government Innovators Forum. Sounds a bit pompous, but anyway, this group is quite a solid group. And I feel, look, what difference has it made? It's made a difference to me, and that's where I'll end it before I hand over to Robyn.
Well, the first thing I want to add is Charles said he doesn't know of any relationships that have come through the festival. I know of at least one here in Germany that formed through the festival, because they kindly told a speaker that he was the spark for their blossoming relationship. No, I mean, we've been having lots of conversations around impact. I think that's quite similar conversations for any entity or movement of this kind, particularly in maybe more non-profit spaces. How do you measure what you're doing? I look at it through two main lenses. One, in terms of our reach, and by that I mean both scale and depth within bureaucracies across the world. There's clearly interest, like there's growing interest. So we're at the point where we've got just shy of 15,000 people signed up to newsletters. Similar growth on social media. This year we had 50 people from 50 countries, 50 involved from 6 continents. And that's a lot of people choosing to come of their own accord. So we've got a relatively limited travel budget, which we try and use as best as possible. But that's a lot of sort of people really feeling the call and choosing to join us. And what's interesting is it's grown over time, particularly. So half of our program is in German and half is in English, which was more of an accident of design, I think, than deliberate. But it's had a really beautiful impact that we've, over these past 5+ years, really reached areas of the German public administration in particular that otherwise wouldn't consider themselves creative, constructive disruptors or innovators. They're like the belly of the beast, if you want to put it that way. But they're people with ideas. They can be imaginative and creative. And if you kind of catch them with that wave and they see that it's an idea that's taking hold, they start to think in this way too. And then with that on the other side, reaching lots more countries as the message spreads. So I think what we're trying to move from there is like reaching more people to then also tracking evidence of how it's being implemented as an idea, which can come through. So far we've heard loads of stories of people who've met at the festival and gone on to collaborate, increasing interest in people who want to take the idea and embed it within existing programs or initiatives that they're running because they find it a useful catalyst for conversations, if nothing else.
Yeah.
And then we're increasingly wanting to work with people who are kind of looking at what does that work look like in practice, like what kind of methodologies exist that really map to creative bureaucracy ideas. Are they the same in different countries, at different levels of government, and so on? But it does definitely feel like a growing wave, which is exciting.
Well, just to add a tiny point, I mean, on the other territories, there are events, and there have been events in different places. There's an event that happens regularly in Prague. There was one in Bergen in Norway. The Prime Minister was even there, coincidentally, of Norway, in Brussels, etc., etc. So that's one indication. Various people say, could we do something somewhere else? The issue there, as ever, as you all know, is how can you help support it, fund it, and so on. Another point I wanted to make in this context is just that the audience is very young, and that's fantastic. I'm probably the oldest person there. Oh, I don't know. But anyway, you get the idea. And that obviously gives it a certain spirit, which is a positive one, I think.
It's huge, because I think that's the key thing I found as a public servant and an older one, is that it's the young ones that I really fear that we're turning off from being public servants, and that hurts. You know, I see them being uncertain about whether this is the thing for them, and I really want them to know it is. I've already had one person who's volunteered to do a gaming event of some kind. Not my language, but I'm like, yay, this sounds brilliant. It sounds like something that's going to, you know, come on, Gen Z, join in, kind of thing, which is really exciting. And that leads me on to my final kind of question, which is, what can individuals do? I mean, we're trying to encourage people to write a blog and to come to us with their ideas, because this is for them, right? This is their tribe. This is all ideas that are going to totally be taken on board and listened to at this stage for us. What would you suggest that, you know, people could bring to this type of an event?
Well, one thing, just to give it a wraparound onto that question, is we felt, or we hope, that we're developing or creating a movement in the making. We sometimes use that phrase, and that means that in theory people can join in, because it's this unspecified movement with no particular boundaries. But basically, we're trying to come across as open as possible. Now, the reality is, of course, you know, you've got to try and make the thing work and so on. So it's never quite as perfect as we try to project. But in a sense, individuals can just come up with ideas, and we're trying to work out how to respond. And in the worst case, we can just simply say, oh, you can have an event that might have that title. You know, we're not trying to own the phrase, that particular phrase. So there's an element of an open door. What do you think, Robyn? What can we do?
Yeah, I think there's different layers, I guess, depending on both what people are interested in and where they're geographically based, would be my two responses there. So we have the Creative Bureaucracy Festival in Berlin, which is the main one, and the location remains there each year. That takes place in June. And we have a call for participation that opens in October. So that's coming up in not too long. And there's a couple of different routes in there. It's mainly for project showcases. So they are projects, for the most part, we say coming from public servants. If it's not a public servant who's submitting, then it should be part of a team that involves a public servant. So the focus is on bureaucrats. And it can be either currently running, recently finished. It's just sort of showcasing what you think in your work is a good example of creative bureaucracy. And then we have a sort of jury process that goes through then community voting as well, via a digital event in March. So that's a sort of pathway through to the festival in June. And then we also have some ideas for digital workshops as well to try and keep some of that more global audience interaction alive. And then if you're otherwise just keen to come, I mean, this happened with Amber back in 2023. She's like, this idea has called me. I'm going to be in Europe. Just wanted to let you know that I'm there. We're getting an increasing number of people doing that too, which is wonderful, because there's a certain phase in the year where we puzzle together the topics that we feel are missing, the wonderful people who've told us are coming, and sort of piece together the remaining slots for the festival. So that's great to see, and also enabling us to join the dots between maybe aligned activities that are working on revitalizing democracy in some other way that wouldn't necessarily use the phrase creative bureaucracy, but as soon as we go into conversation with them, they see the link, and that happened nicely with a couple of groups coming from different parts of the world this year. And then if you can't travel to Berlin, we've got a couple of options. So one Charles already mentioned, which is if you feel even at the tiniest scale, you want to give hosting something with a creative bureaucracy frame a go, whether that's part of an existing event, a new event that you want to set up. It doesn't really matter the scale or size. You can get in touch with us for that. We're really happy to support any activities in that realm. And then what we're also trying to do is act a bit more of as a conduit to existing communities that that already exist for different subtopics, because obviously creative bureaucracy kind of covers all areas of the public sector. So that like apolitical's got a lot of communities of practice. So across anything from agile government, more diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging strategies, futures and foresight, like they've got a growing set there. There's a set of networks here in Germany called Next that bring together different subgroups of public servants. The Centre for Public Impact has a growing collective for the global development community. There's an international design and government community. So we're trying to act a bit more as that connector to point people in the right direction. So that's something we're going to be focusing on moving forwards. But my general, I think if anyone's interested, curious about creative bureaucracy, we have a big button to sign up to our newsletter on our website, and that's probably the best way to stay in touch on all evolving developments. Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. Look, on that note, that's a huge thanks to Charles and Robyn. You're really showing us what a yes if rather than a no because culture looks like. You know, this is just basically nice and open and friendly and welcoming. And we're really grateful for that, and really keen to bring that to Australia and New Zealand for our public servants. So thank you very much for chatting with us today.
Thank you. It was good fun.
Thank you.
Thanks.